Imagine waking up one morning and realizing the money in your pocket has quietly lost its power. Not because of war, not because of invasion, but because the government itself slowly changed the rules of value. This is not a modern story. This happened hundreds of years ago inside one of the most powerful empires the world has ever seen. An empire that stretched across 3 continents. An empire feared by Europe and admired for its administration. And yet, without a single dramatic collapse, inflation slowly hollowed it out from the inside. This is the inflation trick that killed the Ottoman economy. At its height, the Ottoman Empire was an economic giant. Trade flowed from Asia to Europe through its lands, its cities were rich, its markets active, and its currency trusted. For centuries, the Ottoman silver coin, known as the akçe, was stable enough that merchants accepted it without hesitation. Soldiers were paid on time, taxes were predictable, the state worked because the money worked. But empires don't fall only from enemies at the gates. Sometimes they fall from decisions made at desks. The problem began quietly in the late 16th century. Europe had just discovered massive amounts of silver in the Americas. Spanish ships poured silver into European markets, and that silver didn't stay in Europe. It traveled east through trade and eventually flooded into Ottoman lands. At first, this looked like a blessing. More silver meant more coins, more trade, more economic activity. But value does not come from metal alone. It comes from trust and scarcity. As silver became more abundant, its value dropped. Prices began to rise. Bread, meat, rent, everything slowly became more expensive. This was not unique to the Ottomans. Europe experienced inflation too. But the Ottoman response would prove disastrous. Instead of adjusting wages, reforming taxes, or restructuring spending, the Ottoman state chose a shortcut. They debased their currency. Debasement is one of the oldest inflation tricks in history. It works like this. You keep the same coin, the same name, the same face value, but you reduce the amount of precious metal inside it. The government mints more coins using less silver, spreads them across the economy, and uses them to pay soldiers and officials. On paper, nothing changes. In reality, everything does. The Ottoman akçe was slowly stripped of its silver content. Over decades, the coin lost more than half its real value. Officials pretended the coin was unchanged. The people knew better. Prices surged. Merchants demanded more coins for the same goods. Soldiers realized their salaries could no longer feed their families. Farmers struggled as taxes were collected in fixed amounts while costs rose everywhere else. This is where inflation becomes political. The Ottoman military, especially the Janissaries, were not just soldiers, they were a powerful social class. When their pay lost value, they didn't accept it quietly. Mutinies became common. Sultans were pressured, even overthrown. To calm unrest, the state paid more coins, which only made inflation worse. This created a vicious cycle. More debasement led to higher prices. Higher prices led to unrest. Unrest led to higher spending. Higher spending led to more debasement. At the same time, the tax system was breaking down. The Ottoman state relied heavily on fixed agricultural taxes. These taxes did not adjust with inflation. As money lost value, government revenue collapsed in real terms. The state was collecting the same numbers, but buying far less with them. To compensate, tax farming expanded. Wealthy elites paid up front for the right to collect taxes, then squeezed peasants aggressively to make a profit. Rural populations suffered. Productivity dropped. Entire regions became unstable. Inflation doesn't just raise prices, it destroys incentives. Why save money if it loses value every year? Why invest in land or tools if the state might confiscate or tax them unpredictably? Why trust a government that quietly steals value through its currency? Trust evaporated. Foreign merchants began demanding payment in foreign coins. Barter increased. Smuggling grew. The official economy shrank while black markets expanded. The state lost visibility and control over its own system. Meanwhile, Europe was evolving. States like England and the Netherlands were developing early financial institutions, stable currencies, and credit systems. The Ottomans, once economically advanced, fell behind not because they lacked intelligence, but because inflation poisoned their foundation. By the 17th century, the Ottoman economy was trapped. Military costs were rising. Technology was advancing elsewhere. Revenue was weak. Currency was distrusted. Reform attempts came too late and faced resistance from groups that benefited from the broken system. This is the real danger of inflation. It doesn't arrive like a bomb, it arrives like rust, slow, quiet, destructive. The Ottoman Empire did not collapse overnight. It survived for centuries after these problems began. But it never fully recovered its economic strength. Every war became harder to fund. Every reform became more expensive. Every crisis hit deeper. By the time modern economic reforms were attempted in the 19th century, the damage was already baked in. The empire was dependent on foreign loans, foreign banks, and foreign currencies. The final collapse was political and military, but the weakening was economic, all because of a decision to manipulate money instead of fixing fundamentals.